Dr. Sharma, in when we think about religion, typically we associate religion with um, followers going to a church or a mosque or a synagogue and worshiping in a kind of recognizable way. And I wanted to ask that it's my impression that in Hinduism, there are some practices that look a little bit strange or could look kind of different from that other more traditional or kind of more well recognizable paradigm. And so I was wondering what's behind some of the more maybe strange practices in Hinduism that might look strange to an outsider.
Yeah, the optics of Hinduism is very different from that of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. In fact, it is also rather different from that of other religions of Indian origin, Buddhism, Jainism, and Sikhism. Interesting. Yeah. See, Matilda, Hinduism is older than civilization. If one recognized that, then one would be less surprised that it has many archaic, outdated practices. At one stage in the religious evolution of humanity, people may have worshipped animals. Hinduism still does. Other civilizations may have outgrown these practices or moved beyond them. But Hinduism is a very conservative tradition. It welcomes the new, but is very unwilling to discard the old. It has the hoarder's instinct of keeping all options in store, because we do not know which of these may become useful and relevant in the course of the future. So if you can give to this kind of mentality a religious shape, then I think we will recognize that practices which had been discarded earlier by many religions still retained in Hinduism. And here you have a very interesting example of the new turn towards ecology. Now those very practices are being praised in Hinduism as ecologically sensitive. Worship of plants, rivers, animals. That instinct that you never know which religious doctrine or practice might become relevant for our needs. And just as a hoarder's place is very hard, disorganized, and you have everything lying everywhere, this is the outsider's view of Hinduism. Full of things, various things, which don't make sense together. And so that is one reason. There's also another very interesting reason. This reason has to do with the past and its desire to conserve. This has to do with its openness. I think the best way to make this point is purely hypothetical. Suppose one day Christianity and Islam, which are considered at the moment religions of foreign origin in India, become happily domesticated within Hinduism. Their texts are accepted as holy texts. Their practices are accepted as parts of Hinduism. Now, what will the outsiders say? Look at their religion. It believes that God spoke to a certain person. Verbally. Literally. How is this possible? Right? Or that the person whom he spoke to, the prophet, had almost 13 wives. Right? You see what I am saying? What is totally acceptable within a religious group and considered sacred moves into Hinduism as it is, because this is the condition on which Hinduism takes others. Come join us with all your riches. The only problem Hinduism has is its exclusion. If you say, no, we are the only one, we don't want you around. But others are willing to become part of this great family, there's no problem. But when it does that, it does it uncritically. Essentially. So, and then they will say, look at their one of their gods, he hangs like loosely from a cross. What kind of a God is this who can't save himself? You can make this criticism even if you know the Bible. What kind of a God is this who can't save himself? So Hinduism will be subject to all these will be criticisms of Hinduism. Because these strange things in Hinduism are really a testimony to its willingness to accept different communities, religious communities, as part of its own, on their own terms.
You know, I was listening to the radio, and they were talking about how the river Ganges is a person under the law, and that mirrors, some kind of initiatives in Canadian law as well, under like First Nations law, I think, or Indigenous law, and that would be really, sort of progressive, or that is the way of the future.
Very good reference to the Indigenous people. So, in Hinduism, there is no discontinuity between the Indigenous and the modern. They are all part of Hinduism. Your most modern doctrines, some of the kinds we discussed earlier, God and all, and what are the Indigenous people's beliefs? They are part of the same spectrum within Hinduism. Each as effective for the spiritual ennoblement of the people to which it belongs. There's a very deep instinct in Hinduism, a deep instinctive recognition of the phenomenological sanctity of what is considered sacred by any group, and accepting it as such to begin with.
And
then you can engage in debate. How do you reconcile this with that? Sure, but without questioning the sanctity of the person's commitment to that way of life.
And so what would, in this hypothetical future where Christians are also Hindus, what would the responsibility be on the part of the Christian to practice more kind of...
The only response would be not to engage in overt conversion.
To Christianity. I see.
In the sense of separating oneself from this larger community. The best model is sex within a religion.
Mm-hmm.
Just as you can change your sex, at least now in modern Christianity, without any major sense of transiting from one religion to another. at one time a Catholic becoming a Protestant, or a Protestant becoming a follower of the Eastern Orthodox Church, were major religious transitions. Right? But I think not anymore. Or even within the Protestant churches, there would have been major conflicts. So that has to be avoided. And you can convert. But here, a line by a great Christian, Schweitzer, becomes relevant. Example is not the main thing. It is the only thing. That is, if you feel that your way of life is superior, religious life is superior to others, you can make that claim. But only through leading a manifestly superior life, so that the others are drawn on their own to you and voluntarily want to join you. And they may. But they should also be allowed to leave when they want to. When they find something which suits their religious needs better. So there's kind of democracy in practice in religion. Democracy in religion. And you see the same problem as when you have communist parties in a democratic setup. Communist parties' avowed aim is to do away with the democratic structure. If it succeeds, your whole framework is lost. So you can allow it to be part of the framework, but you can't allow it to succeed in such a way that it destroys the framework. This is at the root of the Hindu opposition to proselytizing.